we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the VS Code live stream. Today is Thursday. Is it Thursday? It is Thursday, right? Sheesh, every day is the same. How is everybody? How are you doing? How is your Thursday going? Off to a great start, I hope. Look, Shay, I was here really early, 3:58 a.m. That's got to be some kind of new record. Oh, we got a banner showing. Let's pull that banner down. I'm not ready for banners just yet. See if I can find it. There we go. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for being here. We have a great stream for you today, of course. Before we get started, though, I wanted to show you something that I found, which I thought was really cool. So I want to show you this. We get a lot of course, folks tweeting at us, but this one in particular, this is, there we go. There's the screen. This is DevXplaining. And I thought you might want to check this out. I think his name is Arto, I believe. Anyway, this is a great video because he goes through and shows you some advanced snippet concepts in VS Code, when some of them I didn't even know about. Like, I didn't know that you could do lists or choices and snippets, but you can. And he shows you how to do that. So, you know, you can do a lot of stuff in snippets, but check this video out. It shows you everything that you want to do. And give this channel a subscribe. This is called DevXplaining, and it's quite good. So check that out. All right. So today on our stream, we are doing, what are we doing? We're going to accelerate cloud development with VS Code. Cloud development. All the rage. Everyone's doing it. So you're in the right place. What's up, MZ Linus? Good morning to you as well. How are you? Doing well? All right, awesome. So for this accelerating your cloud development with VS Code, we've got two of my favorite people. Well, actually, one of the people I just met, but the other one I've known for a while. Let's bring them both on. Both work at Microsoft. Matt Hernandez and Savannah Ostrowski. Did I pronounce that last name right?
You nailed it. You nailed it. And we just met. So
yeah, we did. Yes. So now you are one of my favorite people.
Wonderful.
Nice.
So Matt and Savannah, what maybe you could just introduce yourselves and tell people what you do. What is it that you say that you do here at Microsoft?
Yeah, so I'm Savannah. I'm a senior product manager at Microsoft, and I'm working kind of on the cloud native developer experiences and tools, and I work on Matt's team.
And when you say, you just say cloud native developer, what does that mean for people that are like, I don't know the jargon?
Can anyone really describe that in like 3 words or less? I mean, I think it's just like the notion of building apps for the cloud and that are like cloud compatible. I think a lot of people conflate cloud native with Kubernetes, but I don't think it necessarily has to be like that.
So would cloud native be just like, I'm building an app and I'm sort of starting from scratch and I'm building it for the cloud, right? I'm
Correct.
not migrating an existing app. I'm just building something on the cloud. Would that be cloud native?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summing it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think born in the cloud is the phrase that people like to use to describe cloud native, which is just as vague as cloud native. But
yeah, it's also a Bruce Springsteen song. So there's that. And speaking of which, Matt has a few. Matt, who are you? What is it that you do? Let's talk about your massive guitar.
I don't even know anymore. So I'm Matt. I'm a PM on the Azure Tools for VS Code team. So we build Azure experiences in VS Code, mostly for management and all of the Azure services. That's what I'll be showing off today.
And you have a few guitars. Yeah.
Not pictured as like my main guitar stays as close as possible to me. So between meetings, usually.
Which one is your favorite?
The orange one down here.
Let me see. We can't see it. Show it to us.
I didn't know we were gonna do this. It's a Ibanez RGD Prestige.
It's an Ibanez?
Yeah.
Nice.
So this is my main guitar. The rest
is that a 6-string? That fretboard looks really wide.
No, this is 7.
It's a 7-string. So what do you do with 7-string guitars besides play covers of Korn? Is it still a relevant band?
What's that?
Corn chat. Do you know who Corn
yeah,
is? Is that
yeah.
irrelevant?
Corn's
Does
still
anybody
putting
even know
stuff
who
out.
that is?
They just released a new record like not long ago. They're still
Did they really?
touring and stuff. Yeah.
All
Yeah, and I
right.
do have one in the Corn tuning. It's over here. I have a few of these on the bottom are 7, and then the top are 6.
Very nice. What's up, chat? Hey, JPS, how's it going? Hi. And Savannah, you have what looks like, I mean, this is the pandemic, so we get to critique everybody's background, but you have what looks like a cat hotel in the background.
Yeah, so Matt's got a couple guitars. I have a couple cats.
Okay, right.
They're not here because they are disruptive. But sometimes I do bring them on streams and people get really excited about it. But yeah, I adopted them during the pandemic. So yeah.
How many cats did you adopt during the pandemic?
2 sister kittens. Their names are Nori and Miso.
Nice.
I think 2 is an acceptable number, but if you had been like 26, right, then that would have been really awkward for all of us.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about a third cat, which is kind of insane. But you know, when you have 2, 3 doesn't seem like such a leap.
Right, or 14 or 87. You get your own show on TLC. All right, awesome. All right, everybody, enough of that. Let's get right into it. We're going to accelerate development, accelerating cloud development in VS Code. Kick it off for us, Savannah. What you got?
Yeah. So as Burke mentioned, I work here at Microsoft, and earlier this week, my team announced the public preview of a new Azure Developer CLI. And this tool aims to accelerate the time that it takes for you to get from your local development environment to the cloud. But not only is it a standalone CLI, but we've also built out a complementary VS Code extension, which has all of the same commands, and that's what I'll be sharing with all of you this morning. But before hopping over to VS Code, I wanted to take a second to chat about why we created the CLI. And so, you know, as a developer, there are a lot of choices that you need to make when it comes to building, deploying, and securing your application for the cloud. You know, in my own experience, I've been asking questions like, you know, what cloud services should I be using? Which library should I be using? How do I set up my local dev environment? How do I provision infrastructure for my application? How do I know that what I'm doing is like secure, you know? And I think all of these questions can be pretty overwhelming and take time to get answers to and get the right answers to. But not only that, moving from your local development environment to the cloud is time consuming and ultimately impacts your productivity and velocity, especially if you're an app developer when you just want to focus on writing code. And so, you know, many developers, I think, are unfamiliar with kind of the DevOps pieces of engineering systems, and because there's usually like a single token build and deploy person that handles all of those scenarios. But I don't think it really has to be that way. You know, like I think it shouldn't really be that hard for someone to build an application that they intend to have live in the cloud. And so this kind of frames why we created the Developer CLI. You know, we want to provide that tool to get you onto Azure faster, but also to answer those big questions. And those big questions that you need answers to before now become a series of simple, repeatable steps from the environment that you're most comfortable in. And so you see like that big list of questions before became like 3 commands. And so, you know, our CLI under the hood uses these extensible templates that include kind of everything that you need to get an application up and running in Azure. The templates include best practices, application code, reusable infrastructure as code assets, which I'll go into in a bit later. But more than that, they cover the end-to-end scenarios that go far beyond, you know, your typical hello world example. You know, we're talking about entire project scaffolding and how to provision and deploy on Azure, monitoring for application health, CI/CD on every commit, testing. And so to take a look at what this looks like in practice, I'm going to head over to GitHub to talk a bit about our templates.
So, and while you do that, Savannah, when you say sample projects, like in what language? Are they JavaScript? Are they .NET? Like what are the options? In chat, I want to know from you, like what are you coding in these days? JavaScript, Python, .NET, what is it?
Yeah. So to answer your question, we have samples in kind of 3 main languages right now. We have samples in, you know, Python, Node.js, C#. We also have plans to support Java in the near future. But this is an open source project. So we are really we're looking at the community to tell us what you all need and what you want. And kind of looking through this list, I'm just looking at this AZD template topic on GitHub, which is all of the top templates that are AZD compatible. And in here, we've got, stuff that supports a couple different hosts on Azure. So we have stuff for Azure App Service, Azure Static Web Apps and Functions, Azure Container Apps. We've also got some stuff for Dapper. And if you're unfamiliar with Dapper, it's kind of a set of APIs that is used for building microservice applications. Yeah, so that's kind of like the gist of it. But so these are currently the ones that we've created in our Azure samples repo. But again, it's open source. So anyone can create a template and tag it and share it with everyone. And so, we're really looking at the community to build a large set of templates that kind of help everyone get onto Azure faster.
Yeah, Roy. So Roy, write us a PHP template. You're on the hook now, man.
Yeah, create the template.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
We have instructions for that too in our docs, which we can share a link out to later. So yeah, I'll just click into this to-do Python Mongo app template. I'm not going to go into the code here in GitHub because I'm going to open it in VS Code in a second, but just kind of skimming this, it tells us, the front end's written in React, the back end's written in Python with Fast API. And kind of coming back to the notion of having, best practices in the templates, both for Azure, we also have kind of best practices for the language you're writing in. So Fast API leverages type annotations in Python, which is kind of a nice quality check, kind of prevents you from writing as many tests that have to check types. And I found that a lot of folks are really excited about that. And it also uses Azure Cosmos DB for storage and Azure Monitor for monitoring and logging. And kind of scrolling down, we have all of the instructions to kind of get started. We also have an architecture diagram. So if you're unfamiliar with Azure, this kind of helps paint the picture of what exactly it is that we're doing, which I think is super helpful. We also have the VS Code extension, which I'm going to show in just a second. So this looks great to me, but I could have picked any template. I could have created my own template. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hop over to VS Code, and I think, you can all see that. And so right now I'm really just, sorry?
I said we can. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, great. This is just an empty directory that I opened in VS Code because I haven't initialized my project yet. But I'm going to do that using the Azure Developer CLI. And so first I'm just going to show that I installed the Azure Developer CLI extension, which was released earlier this week. You can download it from the VS Code Marketplace, try it out, let us know what you think. But if I, close this and then I open the command palette, which I think, most of you are probably familiar with, I just did a Control-Shift-P. I can type in Azure Developer and I see a bunch of different commands that come up here. I'm going to do this initialize new template application just to kind of keep things simple. And I'll show you in a second. I'll explain in a second why I'm keeping it simple just for now. So I'm going to click this. It's going to ask me for what template I want to use. These are the same templates that you saw in GitHub. These are just all the Azure sample ones for now, but you could totally use another template by specifying the org or user and the repository. But I'm just going to do this Python template. Let's click that. And what this is going to do is it's going to git clone everything for me. It's also going to, now you're seeing it's prompting me for an environment name. To be clear, if you're a Python developer, maybe you think this means my virtual environment name. It does not. It means my Azure environment name. And what this is it's going to be kind of the namespace or the prefix for all of your Azure resources. So I'm just going to name this Savannah, or let's just make it short for now. Let's call it Sav Live 0714 because that's today's date. And this is going to take a second. It's going to ask me for an Azure region. I'm going to pull this up so everyone can see it better. I'm going to just pick the default one that it has, so East US 2. And then I'm going to pick the VS Code demo subscription, which is the one that I should be using for this demo. And it finished. So what happened here, right? I cloned some stuff. We have a bunch of new files in our project. But it also has this Azure directory, which has the same environment name that I entered when I was going through the command or my terminal. And inside here, I've got a .m file, which contains kind of my environment name. So that's, the prefix for all my Azure resources. It's got that location. It's also got the subscription ID and a principal ID. And so this is going to be super important for us when we go to deploy things on Azure. But for now, this is just kind of taking all that information and putting it in a safe place for you. And so kind of the next thing to do is we're actually going to run AZD up. And so I wanted to show this separately just so that things didn't go too quickly. But we can do an initialization so that git clone, pull everything down, set up our environment, provision resources, and deploy in a single step. You could also do it separately through provision and then deploy as well. Let me pull up the. Oop. So I could have done init provision to set up all my Azure resources, deploy for my app code to go onto Azure, or I can just run everything in a single step. It's kind of up to you. This one's pretty snazzy though, so I'm just going to click that, and it's going to kick off starting to kind of provision and deploy all this stuff for me on Azure. We are constrained to a limited demo window, so I'm going to do a little bit of demo magic and go over to another code instance.
Pull it out of the oven. It's done.
Yeah, and it's done. We're all done here. And the reason, so I want to be totally transparent. So it does take a bit of time still to kind of spin up those resources on Azure, but we're not just, hosting your web app on Azure. We're setting up literally everything that you're going to need to be successful and secure for your app. We're talking like all of the peripherals, databases, Key Vault for secret storage, monitoring, all of that good stuff. So it does take a bit of time, but it's still, for me personally, like it's less context switching. I can stay in VS Code. I can do other things and just kind of focus on writing my app code. I don't have to go read a bunch of documentation to figure out what I need. We provide you with kind of opinionated takes on what you think you're going to need. And then I don't have to go to the Azure portal and start trying to figure out what I want to do there. I can just stay in VS Code and everything's great.
So this is really cool, and I work in Microsoft. And so even for me, Azure, it's like 400 services. Like if I want to build an app, like I don't even know what I need, right? Like that's overwhelming for anyone. So this looks great to me, because as a developer, this is what I want, is for someone to tell me, like, this is how we recommend that you do it. Like if it was us, we'd do it this way.
Yeah, for sure. I think I personally spent a ton of time trying to figure out what it is exactly that I would need to move my app to the cloud. And so I think this kind of, it's just less cognitive load, especially if I just want to focus on writing app code. So I guess while we're kind of in this new VS Code instance, I'm going to talk through some of the other files that we have in the template, just because I think it provides a bit of context for how things are being set up. So I mentioned we have this Azure directory. This one I named my environment Savannah Live, because we're live on this VS Code stream. You could actually set up multiple environments using the CLI. So I could either open the command palette like I did earlier and see all these these Azure Developer commands, or I can open up, I can right click on my azure.yaml file that's in my template, and I'll also see all of the commands that are available. And coming back to the environments, so by default, when you set up and you initialize a project, we ask you for an environment name. You could create a new environment name. You could change the default environment name. And you might want to do that if you were doing something like setting up different environments for dev, test, prod. So there's that, which is kind of awesome. We also have a dev container JSON. So if you're familiar with that, setting up your dev environment in a container, maybe you're in code spaces. And it has all these great VS Code extensions to kind of help with your local development or cloud local development if you're in code spaces. How do you refer to that one? And then we have a GitHub Actions workflow that we have set up here, and I'm going to show that one in a second as well. And then we got some local stuff for local development. We've got a launch JSON for debugging, task JSON for spinning up the web app for local development. I'm going to close some stuff off so it's easier to read. And then we have an infra folder, which is kind of cool for our templates. This hosts kind of all of our infrastructure as code. So basically, if you're unfamiliar with infrastructure as code, the notion is that basically we can programmatically define the resources that we want to have provisioned on Azure. And so in here, you'll see things like, it's going to start up the Bicep extension because we have, full IntelliSense and all that good stuff for writing and editing Bicep. But this specifies kind of like, I'm going to set up a Cosmos database and Key Vault and app service front end and back end and app insights. And so this is just basically how to define that. Everything in this template is totally customizable. I think that's also something I really want to drive home, is that you could edit these files. You could change out the application insights dashboard. You could, swap out the app code in the SRC directory and add your own app code or edit the app code, and just build upon basically a good foundation. And then, although I guess the one other thing to mention kind of on the infrastructure as code side is that right now we support Bicep, which is like the domain-specific language for provisioning Azure resources. We also have plans to support Terraform and possibly Pulumi in the future as well for folks that are used to different other technologies on the infrastructure as code side of things. And then we have tests that are written in Playwright, which is an open source like testing library that we also develop here at Microsoft. So you have tests for your application. And then finally, I think the notable thing here, last notable thing is that we also have an Azure.yaml, which kind of ties everything together. You can see the application template specified. You can see kind of the services. We've got like a JavaScript front end with app service, a Python backend with app service. And yeah, so those are kind of the files in the project. But again, totally customizable, also idiomatic and language specific. So you're not, writing other app code to try and get your stuff onto the cloud. You're writing code in the language that you're most familiar with.
So Savannah, let me ask you, I think one of the things, even for me, that's difficult about developing for Azure or any cloud, fill in the blank, right? Is that there's so much cognitive load just in like the things that we just went over. So much so that my camera just crashed. But if I'm an app developer, do I need to know what that stuff is? In other words, if I'm just trying to build and deploy an app, do I need to know what that stuff is? How important is it for me to understand what's in the assets folder? What is a bicep file? What is infrastructure as code? What is a dev container? Are those concepts that I need to understand to use this template?
No, I mean, I think a lot of this, like the dev container is totally, optional depending on your environment that you want to work in. It's very possible that you're just like you would just want to see some dashboards, or you just wanted to do all the provisioning and you don't want to touch anything, and that's totally fine. So I think it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. I think we've tried to make the templates, as approachable as possible for kind of the new developer, and kind of like if you don't want to think about the infra file and you just want to get your stuff into the cloud, like I think you're totally welcome to do that. But I think to your point, I think something that we're going to continue to focus on are ways to make this more approachable, right? Like, what if I find writing Bicep too hard, or what if I find learning a new technology while I'm already learning about JavaScript and HTML and CSS, like that's a lot, right? So I think we're looking to hear from the community about how they find this experience, and because this is our public preview, we're like totally taking in that feedback.
Yeah, so that's great, chat. This is your opportunity to sort of chime in here and say what you think. I think I can't speak on behalf of all developers, but for me, when I get started, I just want to build, right? And then by the time you get to something like infrastructure as code, it's the kind of thing where you grow into it. You need it at some point, not in the beginning, but you do need it down the road. Or a dev container, you need it down the road. GitHub Actions, you want that down the road, but that's all here. It's already all here.
Yeah.
So you can kind of just start coding, building your app, and not worry about that stuff. And then when you need it, it's already there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like to your point, like you don't have to do all of this all at once right away, right? Like you could say, I just want to build like provision and deploy. Maybe later I want to set up my GitHub pipeline. You can do that in a single click, right? Like all of those things, we tried to make it easy to onboard, but also there's no rush to get all this set up if you don't need it, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Again, very choose your own adventure. Because I think it's really, otherwise it's very difficult, because I think everyone's got a different combination and permutation of the technologies they're using in their projects. So yeah, so I think we're trying to make it as flexible as possible.
Perfect. All right, great.
Cool. So when I ran AZD up in the other window, basically what's going to happen is it was just going to basically start trying to provision things for me on Azure. Once it finishes, it will print a URL out in the terminal. Let's open this up. And it will bring me to Azure, which I can basically see that it provisions stuff for me. So if I go into my resource group that I created, I can see that it created me some app service stuff and application insights, Key Vault, just basically all of the infrastructure that I wanted.
Is that your environment there on the end, that NWZCC? Is that the environment that you put in?
The environment I put in was Savannah Live. I believe this is
okay.
Yeah. So this is just basically everything within my resource group. These names are definitely for uniqueness, I'm assuming.
Oh, that's right, because a lot of these have to be unique across all of Azure. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of after provision. And then because the AZD up command combines initialize, provision, and deploy, the next thing that we would see after, kind of the provision was finished was that we would see URLs for our front end and our back end. And so I've pre-opened these, but basically we have an API reference that's written in Open API or Swagger, if you're familiar with that, before it was kind of rebranded as Open API. That has all of my endpoints here, so I can read all about the back end with some nice docs. And then I have a front end that's totally functional, wired up to a database. I already added that I need to call the vet for my cats that I mentioned earlier.
Already?
Yeah, right. I need to call them. And then I could add I want to call the dentist. Maybe I want to mark the dentist as completed. Great. I can totally do this. This is also I can share this. This is live. And yeah, so that's kind of the provision and deploy. All that stuff was created for me with just one command. I could also run it separately with the Azure AZD provision or AZD deploy command one by one, depending on kind of what you want to do. We've tried to make it flexible. And I guess one more thing before kind of moving on to the last part of this, which is kind of actually there's two more things I want to show. This Azure Monitor, this is just going to open up my dashboard, which I think is super awesome because I don't know about all of you, but I've spent so much time making dashboards to monitor performance and usage and reliability stuff. And we have that created for you with kind of, you can refresh it as frequently as you want, but we've given you kind of a really solid foundation for monitoring kind of application health, which I think is pretty awesome. And then now I'm going to show kind of the GitHub side of things. So right now we have support for CI/CD with GitHub Actions. We'll have support for Azure pipelines in the future as well, coming soon. But if I click this, I've already run this once because I wanted to test it before we did this live demo. It's going to set up a GitHub pipeline for me based on this file, this Azure dev.yaml. I'm going to open this up more so everyone can see what's happening. It's going to ask me, do you want to commit and push your local changes to GitHub? And I do. And it is going to push all my code up. And if I go over to the repo, and if you've done this for the first time, it'll set up the branch, your remotes, the repository, ask you if you want it to be private or public. So there's lots of customizability there. And then I can see that I have successfully, set up my own repo on GitHub with this template. If I go over to GitHub Actions, I can see I just triggered a new GitHub Actions run. I've run it twice before. And yeah, so now you have CI/CD on every commit, so you can make sure that things are running smoothly. And if I click into this, something that I haven't mentioned is that, actually, I'll go to a completed run just because I think it'll be easier to see, is that the commands that are being used in VS Code, the AZD init, AZD provision, AZD deploy, are the exact same commands that are used across clients. And by that, I mean the same commands you would see in VS Code, in your preferred terminal of choice. And if you were using GitHub Actions, you can see it's literally the exact same command that's being run across all of the different places that you would want to use the CLI. So if I go even into the terminal and I type azd-h, I still see those exact same commands. So there's consistency. There's less of a learning curve to say oh, VS Code did magical things for me, and now I don't really understand how I would go and kind of debug this in the terminal. You can totally use the CLI wherever you are most comfortable with. And yeah, so I think that's pretty, for me, pretty neat. I think the other thing kind of in that same vein is that we're not really doing anything magical for you. We're purely an orchestrator that's doing things on Azure on your behalf. So, everything that the CLI is doing is something that you can read and learn about, and it's just nothing magical happening under the hood, which I think for me, like as someone who wants to understand things on Azure and wants to learn more, is a huge benefit. Yeah, so that's pretty much the end of what I wanted to show you. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Matt. He's going to talk to you about managing Azure resources from within VS Code.
So let's do that real quick, though. This good question from Ryan here is asking about documentation for building templates.
Yeah, we do have a documentation for building templates on our Dev Hub. I can pull up the link, or someone else maybe in the chat. I've got a couple teammates in here. Maybe they can link it. But if you go to the aka.ms/azd, that will bring you to the homepage for our documentation. And from there, there'll be a little entry in the side rail or the table of contents, which will say like, enable your project is like an AZD template. It kind of walks through how you would go and do that. And also, if you try that out, please come and talk to us on GitHub. Tell us what you thought of that experience. We're trying to make that as easy as possible.
Yeah, I think this. Let me just edit this. I think it's just this. Hold on. Look at this banner, right? This should be this right here. That we had a C on the air there. Just AZD. That's where people need to go. Is that what people need to do now if they want to check this out? Okay.
Yes, that's all of our documentation. It's got getting started, how to set up a template. It's got documentation on VS Code and how to get started there as well. And yeah, I think that's a good starting place.
Awesome. All right, chat. AZD, aka.ms/AZD is where you need to go to check out the, what is it called? Azure Developer, the Dev CLI? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Azure Developer CLI.
Azure Developer CLI. All right. Awesome. Yep. All right. Awesome. So with that, let's bring on Matt and his 900 guitars. There he is.
Not that many.
Well, there's like 12. Yeah, somebody earlier actually picked one out. Hold on.
The roads.
The roads in the background. Ryan again. Yeah. Which one?
That was actually my first guitar. That's a Hondo Formula One from like 1994, I think.
Wow.
It's not nearly as fancy as like a Jackson RR24 or something.
How many guitar players do we have in the chat here? Let's see. Who plays guitar? Not do you own guitar? Do you play guitar? Lots of people own guitar. I own guitar. I don't play guitar.
Come on, Dirk.
All right. All right, Matt. All right. What do we got?
So I'm going to share here. So I wanted to tell a bit of a story. So Savannah showed, getting started, not having to pick all of the different things. And Bert pointed out, like, there are an overwhelming number of Azure services. And once you get that stuff up and running, we have some tools. So my team works on this other piece of the Azure management in VS Code. And once you get everything up and running, from here, you can stay in VS Code and continue to manage your apps. We actually just shipped a big release. I'll actually show you what the old version. So this is what it used to look like when you would install every extension. You'd end up with all of these different explorers, and we recently just integrated in to fit a little bit better experience and much closer to what you'll get when you run the Dev CLI. So from here, you can grab your app service instances. You can find like the website that Savannah just deployed, the API and stuff like that. But this view isn't super helpful because it is organized by service. So we also introduced this resource grouping. And
nice.
Here, yeah, we can find Savannah Live. And now this is everything that was in that resource group. And Bert, I'm so glad that you brought up there are just too many Azure services. I'm going to go back to that several times. You'll notice that we're only showing certain things. These are only the things. So these are the things that are today supported 100% in VS Code. Everything else will be in here. And we do have certain things that we'll do. Like if you click on it, you'll see the ARM response if you just want to get a look at what that resource actually looks like. And you can always just go and open it in the portal. But we've really focused on the things that you're going to use as you're developing your app. So another thing we have is focus. So from here, I can actually just focus in on what Savannah deployed. And I can go to my website or Savannah's website. And again, this is going to be focused on what's next, right? You've created the files, you've deployed it, you've set up CI/CD, you have a real working product, you have something that's running slow or it's down. This is where you would come to, or your dashboard as well, but this is where you would come to check on your logs, look at the different settings. We specifically include things, app settings. These are your environment variables.
Yeah.
I
use that one all. That's the one I probably use more than anything is the app settings in there because you can edit them right from here. Yeah, or add them,
right.
view them, just look at them.
Yep. We include, we'll skip databases for now, but we include all the deployments. This is just be like a tag. You can, I probably won't do it for this demo, but you can actually right click and revert to a deployment depending how you've set up your deployment. I wouldn't recommend that if you're using CI/CD. You'll have other options for that, but you can.
Friends don't let friends right click deploy or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to close this for now. Here you can actually connect to your live logs. So this will just open up your output and connect it as if it were a terminal, and you can see your logs in real time as you're making requests to that. You can go back in time as well. Kudu is our deployment mechanism. You'll see like deployment logs and stuff like that in there. And then here's some other options. This is more for if you're not using something like DevCLI, but the other thing that I wanted to focus on is databases. So from here, I can actually just take this guy and I can move it over here. So while I'm working on the code, I actually have.
So what did you wait? What did you just do? Because I forget that you can do this in VS Code. You just basically just like drag anything anywhere.
Yeah. Any Sash, any Explorer, you can just drag it wherever you want.
So you just drag it to a different. So you drag it to the file explorer. So your project's up top, your Azure resources are below.
Yep. Yeah. So in this case, we do persist this. We use there's an API in VS Code. I think it's called Mementos, where we will store this grouping and this focus state, so that anytime you open this workspace again, you'll still have your Explorer here. You'll still have this resource group focused, all that stuff. Yeah, and so as you're deving on this, like I said, you can do the normal things that you would do here. As you push, you can actually view the deployment logs as well. But another thing that is kind of sketchy, but it's really helpful whenever you're in development, is actually to come in here and so this is the database that's connected to this thing, and I'm gonna switch back over here. I'm sorry for the video feedback.
Video feedback. That's I've never heard it called that before. That's great.
So Savannah added this item, and if I go over here and I look at to-do items, I can see call the vet for Nori Museum. My cats, I also have 2 cats. They have different names. They are Bijou and Sybil. So I can actually change this. This is connected to the database. And if I just refresh this page, give it a second to load because it's a single page app. Oh, come on.
The demo gods say no. Denied.
We'll give that a second because it's hitting that backend API, and now I'm nervous that I broke something else in between these. But yeah, so this is writing directly to the database. Like I said, it's sketchy, but when you're deving on something, like, it's incredibly helpful. Thanks. You as you're testing, as you're trying out different schemas, if you're using something like that, incredibly helpful.
Yeah, this one I've used a lot too, where I make an update and then I change it back, and then I need to test some value and see if it rolls through and some ID, and being able to do that right there is super useful. And especially if you come from a background like I do, like .NET, where you have the SQL Server Management Studio, it's very visual, and you can make all of your changes right there. You just do it right there. So I want that same kind of experience. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna keep this short. I do have a couple of other things I'd like to show. We've split the extensions into a couple of different pieces here. You mentioned like the friends don't let friends right click deploy. You can do that in here as well. It's this little button here. There are a couple of different types of apps you can deploy. Definitely, if you're going to do something real and it's a real product, use the Dev CLI. You'll be much better off. It's much better for working with a team. But if you're just kicking the tires and you want to try something out, like, this is a great place to just get started with very little overhead. We have support for, let me go back to types here. we have support for all of these services. So static web apps is going to be like that's the good stuff right there. That's for your single page apps, your React apps, your Vue, whatever you're into with serverless backends. And we also support creating those serverless backends in your workspace, so you don't have to just figure that out on your own. We'll help you set all that stuff up. And then the other thing I want to point out is this help and feedback. So if you install these, there's a link, aka.ms something something. It's actually just the Azure Tools extension pack. You'll get this full list right here. This will actually, help you get started and help explain some of those things. There's also very specific, this will take you out to tutorials that walk through the different services. So if you want to try just the one-off here, you can do that.
So is that workspaces contextual with whatever item is highlighted in the sidebar there? In other words, like, if I don't know, you're not sharing your screen anymore, but
yeah, sorry. It was too soon. I jumped the gun.
Too soon, too fast.
Boom. All right.
What's that? Yeah. So when you on the workspaces, you clicked like the plus, and it was like create a new function, right?
Yeah.
So is that contextual to what you have? It's not.
No.
In other words, like if you highlighted Postgres, would it be like create a new table?
No. So if you wanted to create something up, think of it like this. Up here is going to be your remote. This is everything in the cloud. So if you wanted to create a new table on Postgres, you'd actually have to go into the server.
You would do it there. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to do something that's connected to the cloud, you do it here. If you want to do something that involves your local files, you're down here. That includes, scaffolding out new projects, deploying your files to the cloud, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and these are kind of contextual. So we have this really nice architecture. I don't know how exciting this is for folks that don't build extensions, but we do have a really, it's like a plugin architecture. So if I go in here and disable functions and then reload this. So notice I don't get the functions.
It's not there.
Anymore.
Okay.
No more option. You will see your function apps, but once you expand them, you'll be prompted to go and install it for the additional features. So we tried to make it so that if you're only using one thing, like if you're only using app service or static web apps, you don't have to install all of those other things. We've been very, very intentional about making them small and fast. We put a ton of work into that. So it shouldn't impact your machine. But if you don't want those things, you don't have to have them. You'll still be able to at least see your apps. You can still do the tags. You can still see the ARM properties, all of that stuff without ever installing that extension.
And you can still right click and view in Portal, which is got to be the action people use the most. That's the one I use all the time. Just really? Take me to the spot in the Portal. Yeah.
No, you should stay here.
Yeah. Something's missing. Never leave VS Code. Yeah. Somebody had asked once, they were like, when is VS Code going to be able to check your email? Or like, when is it going to be a full email client? So like you just never leave, right? Eventually it's just an operating system at some point. I don't know.
Please nobody do that.
somebody build a full email client in VS Code. Let's see what it looks like. Photoshop in VS Code. All right.
I'm afraid that, yeah.
It's already there. I think, well, Photoshop kind of is too. Like there's Luna Paint. So you can already.
Yeah.
What can't you do? All right. Well, where should people go for that extension? It used to be a bunch of extensions. It's not anymore. Yeah.
It's still a bunch. It's not a bunch. It's 7, and it's that aka.ms. But if you just open up VS Code and search for Azure, it'll be somewhere in the top of the list. If you just grab the Azure Tools extension pack, that'll give you like the core good stuff. So app service functions, static web apps, storage, databases, and the extension pack doesn't lock you into having all of those things. You can uninstall the pieces that you don't want. And like I said, they'll still show up in the lists. And if you want to get them back, you can get them back.
All right. So folks, we got sort of 2 extensions that you should check out here. One is the Azure Dev extension. Is Dev CLI extension? What's it called?
Yeah, Azure Dev CLI.
Azure Dev CLI extension and the Azure extensions themselves. Give that a try. Cloud development, when you're getting started with it, no matter which cloud you choose, Azure's no exception here, is complicated, can be, especially the terminology. I remember somebody made, for one of the cloud providers, they made like a translation document once. It was like, this service is actually this, right? Like, you want to host a web app, you use this service. And so I think that these templates are a great way to get started with that, to figure out what does what. Quick comment from Shane. Feedback on the extensions in the CLI. Apparently they're gonna, whatever changes you want, they're gonna make them for you very quickly.
I'm going to show you a little trick. All of the stuff that we've talked about today it's all open source. So the Dev CLI is actually Developer CLI if you're searching for it in VS Code. So if you go in here and you search for Azure and you find, let's just do app service. All of these will have the repository here. All open source. If you have feedback, if you have problems, open issues, we are incredibly active in here. Like, my team focuses exclusively on these extensions. This is not like a side project or anything like that. This is our full-time gig. So we will get to you ASAP, and it's super important. We'd love to hear from all of you, and definitely help us improve them.
All right, chat. Well, thank you, Matt and Savannah. We'll bring Savannah back on because she's actually there. She is. Hey, Savannah, thank you so much for being here and showing us that stuff. Whenever I see stuff like that, I would just want to go try it because I like to build stuff. It's kind of like when there's a new JavaScript framework, I just can't help myself. I just want to build something. So everybody check that out, grab those extensions, and thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, chat. That's it. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday and the weekend. You have a whole weekend to try these things out. And also, I think if you don't have an Azure account, don't we give you $200 in free resources, something like that? A $200 credit.
When you install the extensions, when you go to the little Azure Explorer, there will be a link to sign up if you don't have an account. And that explains everything. But yeah, it's $200 in credits. There's some stuff that I think is perpetually free, but then you have some credits you can use on stuff.
And so just also, this is important because when you run out of those credits, you don't actually get charged. They stop working, is what happens if you don't pay for them. But you have to worry about getting charged. That does not happen when you run out of your free credits, which is, we should figure out a better way to let people know that that's the case. We won't charge you. All right. Thank you, chat. Thanks for being with us, Matt and Savannah. And we will see you all next week for the next VS Code live stream. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert.
Bye. Thank you.